Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving deep into a feeling many of us know intimately. The frustrating gap between relentless effort and the rewards we expect. You're someone who embodies dedication. You work 60 hours a week. You show up early. You stay late. You're the person who says yes when others say no, believing in the virtue of commitment. You follow the rules. You consistently sacrifice your time, your energy, your health for the job, for the team, for the promise of someday. You pride yourself on your integrity. You're loyal, you're honest. You take pride in doing things the right way. And yet, despite this unwavering diligence, do you find yourself stuck? Do you watch as someone else, someone who cuts corners, talks more than they work, knows the right people, but lacks your skills rise higher, faster, living the life you thought you'd earned? It's a scenario that plays out all too often, leaving you with that sinking feeling and the burning question, what did I do wrong? But perhaps, as we've touched on before, that's the wrong question. Perhaps the more profound, more illuminating question is, what lie have I been told? This isn't about assigning blame, but about seeking clarity, about understanding the often invisible scripts that guide our lives and careers. From our earliest years, many of us are immersed in a powerful narrative, the gospel of hard work. From childhood, you were taught that hard work leads to reward, that effort equals outcome. It's a comforting and seemingly logical equation. We're told implicitly and explicitly that if you just grind long enough, the system will eventually notice, recognize, and repay you. School lessons, family advice, societal accolades, they all reinforce this idea. We learn that virtue lies in diligence, and that fairness is the ultimate arbiter. This belief becomes a cornerstone of our worldview, shaping our expectations and our actions. We internalize the idea that to be a good person or a good employee is to be tirelessly industrious and patiently expectant. But what happens when lived experience starts to chip away at this foundational belief? What if that formula, that direct line from effort to reward, is broken, or, more unsettlingly, what if it was never real to begin with? This is where we encounter the challenging insights of thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher renowned for his courage in shattering illusions and exposing the hidden architecture of human belief. Nietzsche wrote extensively about what he termed moral labor, that specific kind of work so often glorified for its inherent sacrifice, its unquestioning obedience, and its profound humility. And his conclusion, he argued, it is not noble. Instead, he posited that it can often be a form of spiritual slavery, a psychological trap designed not to uplift you, but to keep you in place. Think about that for a moment. A trap. Why would such a system exist? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. In a world where power determines outcomes, morality is often used to control those who have none. This isn't to say morality itself is bad, but that its application and interpretation can be manipulated. You were taught to believe that virtue is its own reward, that if you simply kept your head down and stayed good, life would eventually be fair. But is life inherently fair? Or is it, more accurately, a complex interplay of forces? Life is competitive. Life is political. And the hard truth is, the system you serve doesn't reward virtue in isolation. It rewards value. But here's the crucial distinction. Often, it's not necessarily the value you create through sheer effort, but the value you control. That's why the nurse pulling a 12-hour shift gets paid less than the TikToker selling a get-rich-fast course. One creates immense, immediate human value. The other controls a narrative, an audience, a perception of value that scales differently. That's why a blue-collar worker who breaks their back every day will retire with barely enough, while someone who manipulates markets walks away with millions. The disparity isn't always about the effort involved, but the leverage applied. It's not your fault that you believed the myth. In fact, the myth was designed for people like you, people who are honest, diligent, and willing to contribute. It was designed to keep you obedient, to keep you working, to keep you from asking dangerous questions like, who benefits from my loyalty? Who profits from my exhaustion? Why does the system praise hard work and reward something else entirely? Now, it's vital to understand that Nietzsche didn't say, you should stop working. He didn't glorify laziness or selfishness. That's a common misinterpretation of his challenging ideas. What he challenged was the idea that obedient labor is inherently moral, that to suffer without reward is somehow sacred, that virtue means submission. He called this prevailing mindset slave morality, a belief system born not from strength but from weakness, not from power, but from fear, the fear of stepping out of line, the fear of asserting one's own values, the fear of questioning the established order. And so, if you feel stuck despite doing everything right, you're not crazy. You're waking up. You're beginning to see, perhaps with some discomfort, that the world isn't malfunctioning. It's functioning exactly as it was built to. The individuals who consistently rise, the ones who seem to navigate these complex systems with ease, aren't always the most skilled or the most selfless. They are often the ones who understand power, how to navigate it, how to claim it, and crucially, how to detach their worth from whether or not the system externally approves of their every move based on conventional goodness. This naturally leads to a critical reevaluation. So ask yourself, what if working harder is not the answer? What if piling on more hours, taking on more responsibility without a corresponding increase in leverage or control, isn't the path to the fulfillment you seek? What if the belief in moral labor is not your salvation but your cage? Because until you confront that lie, you'll keep grinding while someone else rewrites the rules. Let's take a closer look at the contradiction hiding in plain sight. If hard work leads to success, then why do the hardest working people in society so often struggle just to survive? Think about it. We see them every day. The construction workers who rise before the sun and labor until their backs ache. The caregivers, the teachers, the nurses who pull 12-hour shifts, racing between patients, skipping meals, missing holidays. Consider the delivery drivers, janitors, bus operators, truckers, people who keep cities alive, who make the physical world function. Their labor is undeniably essential. And yet, these are the same people who live paycheck to paycheck, who worry about rent, who can't afford to get sick. Their contribution is immense, but their control over the system that determines their reward is often minimal. Meanwhile, someone filming get-rich-quick tips in a rented Lamborghini on TikTok is making more in a day than that nurse earns in a month. You've seen it, you've felt that disparity. This isn't a rare glitch in the system. This is the system. It's a stark illustration of the difference between creating value through labor and capturing value through leverage, perception, and control. Because while labor builds the world, labor does not control it. The people who often earn the most, who wield the most influence, CEOs, hedge fund managers, politicians, thought leaders, they are not typically the ones sweating in the heat or grinding in the cold. They are not usually pushing physical limits or sacrificing their bodies in the same way. They operate in a different domain entirely, the domain of leverage, perception, control. They don't just work. They position. They influence. They own. They understand that wealth and influence often accrue not just from doing the work, but from owning the means of production, controlling the narrative, or building scalable systems. Let's be brutally honest. We've built a world where value isn't rewarded based on effort, but based on power. A world where controlling capital, networks, and narratives pays far more than producing anything tangible. And it's crucial to grasp that that world is by design. It evolved this way. It's tempting to think this is unfair, that there's been some kind of mistake. But as Nietzsche might argue, again, this isn't a malfunction. This is how the game has been set up for centuries. Because physical labor, no matter how honest, can be replaced, automated, outsourced, devalued. Its very tangibility can make it a commodity. But control over resources, over people, over ideas is scalable. The individual artisan can only produce so much. The nurse can only treat one patient at a time. But the investor can move billions with a single click. The influencer can reach millions with a single post. And the system favors scale. And here's where the lie of moral labor becomes especially cruel. We've been conditioned to believe that suffering is noble, that endurance is honorable, that those who serve quietly, who sacrifice without complaint, are the moral backbone of society. And they are. Their contributions are vital. But morality doesn't pay the bills. Altruism, while commendable, is not a recognized currency in most economic systems. Praise doesn't build wealth, and sacrifice doesn't automatically translate into influence or power. While the working class is told to keep your head down and be grateful, those at the top are trained in strategy, in law, in manipulation, in capital acquisition. They are often taught not to serve, but to manage. Not to endure, but to dominate, or at least, to strategically navigate. They learn the rules and then learn how to rewrite them. So ask yourself, if moral labor is so righteous, so essential, why doesn't it come with power? Why are the most indispensable workers also often the most disposable? Why does society preach the value of hard work, then funnel the rewards elsewhere? Nietzsche would say it's because the moral system itself was crafted by the powerful, not to liberate the masses, but to pacify them, to maintain order and ensure a steady supply of willing workers. It teaches obedience, not sovereignty, self-sacrifice, not self-assertion. It glorifies submission, then punishes those who dare to question the hierarchy. That's why the lie persists, because it benefits those in charge, because it keeps people striving, hoping, and working for a reward that, for many, never comes. Because the promise of someday is the most effective chain ever forged. So the question becomes clear: if hard work doesn't lead to power, then what does? And more importantly, are you willing to unlearn the lie you were raised to believe? To understand how this lie took hold, why the world continues to reward manipulation over merit, perception over perseverance, we have to go deeper. We have to look at the very foundation of the values we've been taught to live by. And for that, we turn again to Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche didn't see morality as a universal, divinely ordained good. He saw it as a weapon created, shaped, and deployed by those in power to serve their own ends. Or, in other cases, created by the less powerful as a means of psychic survival and revaluation. In his eyes, what we often call morality isn't absolute truth. It's strategy. He famously drew a sharp line between two competing moral systems: master morality and slave morality. Understanding this distinction is key to grasping his critique. Master morality is born from strength. It arises from individuals or groups who are powerful, confident, and self-affirming. It celebrates ambition, boldness, creativity, and the will to shape the world. It values excellence, courage, and a certain noble disregard for petty concerns. It does not wait for permission. It does not ask to be recognized. It declares its own value. In this framework, the one who holds master morality defines good by what enhances their power, their freedom, their capacity to build and command. Bad is simply what is weak, common, or hinders their expression of strength. Strength is not seen as a threat. It is a virtue, and virtue is whatever affirms life, power, and possibility. But slave morality, that's different. Nietzsche argued that slave morality is born from weakness, or more precisely, from the experience of being oppressed or powerless. It emerges from those who cannot compete on the battlefield of power as defined by the masters. So, lacking the power to overcome their oppressors directly, they redefine the rules. They engage in what Nietzsche called a transvaluation of values. They claim that humility is superior to strength, that obedience is nobler than dominance, that suffering is a sign of moral purity. Meekness, patience, kindness, born from necessity rather than choice. These become the highest virtues. The qualities of the masters, pride, ambition, power, are deemed evil. In this system, the qualities that once defined weakness are reframed as virtues because it's the only way the powerless can find dignity in a world they cannot control. It's a psychological coup, a reevaluation of all the masters' values. And here's the trap. Once this moral code spreads, it becomes sacred, untouchable. It permeates culture, religion, and societal norms. It's no longer seen as a strategy for survival or a reaction to oppression. It's taught as absolute truth. This, Nietzsche argued, is how moral labor came to be praised. The idea that good people sacrifice, that honorable people serve, that virtue lies in doing your duty expecting nothing in return. We romanticize the worker who never complains, who always says yes, who puts the needs of others before their own, without realizing that this narrative serves those who benefit from their silence and their uncomplaining labor. Nietzsche would tell you, you are not rewarded for your morality. You are pacified by it. You might be praised for being dependable, promoted for being manageable, But these affirmations are often designed not to empower you, but to keep you from asking uncomfortable questions about the distribution of real power and reward. The system throws you a title, a plaque, a raise, just big enough to keep you hopeful, just small enough to keep you dependent. And all the while, the true currency, ownership, control, power, remains out of reach. So why does this belief system, this slave morality, still hold so much power over so many? Why do millions of people still cling to the promise that suffering equals virtue? That sacrifice will be seen, that obedience will be rewarded? Because the story is beautiful, provides solace, because it gives meaning to pain. It offers a framework of cosmic justice, because it allows people to endure unfairness without confronting it directly, by promising an eventual, perhaps otherworldly, reward. Slave morality survives not because it is true, but because it is comforting. And comfort is a powerful sedative. But Nietzsche didn't write to comfort. He wrote to awaken, to provoke, to force us to confront the terrifying freedom that comes when you stop waiting for justice and start creating your own terms. When you realize that the universe is indifferent to your personal sense of fairness, and that value systems are human constructs. And so the real question begins to take shape. Not just why we were taught to suffer quietly, but who benefits when we do. But if this system is so rigged, so clearly designed to reward control over contribution, why do so many good people still believe in it? Why do millions of hardworking men and women continue to chase a promise that rarely delivers? The answer isn't just economic. It's deeply psychological. Starts early, long before your first paycheck. From childhood, we're taught that the world is fair, that good things happen to good people, that justice will prevail. Our stories, cartoons, school lessons, they all repeat the same comforting refrain. If you do what's right, you'll be rewarded. Be honest, be kind, be diligent, and in the end, life will make sense. This instills a powerful cognitive bias. But here's the problem. That belief has a name. Psychologists call it the just world fallacy. It's the idea that the world is inherently fair, that effort equals outcome, that what you give will always come back. It's a cognitive shortcut that helps us navigate a complex and often chaotic world. It's a beautiful idea. It gives people hope. It helps us make sense of suffering. But it's not true, not in any absolute guaranteed sense. And clinging to it, especially in a system designed to reward power over principle, isn't just naive. It's dangerous, because while you're working late, double-checking spreadsheets, fixing problems you didn't cause, operating from a belief in eventual fairness, someone else is learning how to play the board. While you're saying yes, being polite, taking on the extra shift, believing your virtue will be recognized, someone else is building alliances, studying leverage, understanding exactly how to make the system work for them. You believe you're being moral. They're being strategic. And in this world, strategy often wins. That's why the engineer who keeps the servers running gets laid off, while the reputation advisor with political connections gets promoted. That's why the teacher who inspires students struggles for resources, while a slick marketer selling unproven courses thrives. That's why the nurse loses her weekend bonus, but the hospital's PR budget doubles. You've been taught to trust the latter. They were taught how to find the escalators or even how to own the building. And here's where it gets cruel. The system doesn't just fail to reward hard work consistently. It uses your belief in fairness to keep you locked in place. The longer you wait for your virtue to be noticed, the easier you are to control. Because people who believe in justice don't rebel. They don't organize effectively to demand more. They keep waiting for recognition, for fairness, for someday. But someday never comes on its own terms. This isn't just about money. It's about mindset. It's about understanding that if you keep showing up with the wrong map, you'll never reach the right destination. The rules you were taught were designed to produce good workers, not powerful people. Good, compliant components of a larger machine. Because the people who taught them to you, or rather the system that propagated these rules, they understood the game. They just needed someone else to keep playing it by those specific rules. So, if the world isn't fair, if virtue doesn't automatically lead to victory, then what does? How do you survive without becoming ruthless? How do you move forward without losing your soul? The answer isn't to abandon morality. It's to stop worshiping it as a passive state of being. It's to stop treating sacrifice like a strategy in itself. To realize that good intentions are not a plan. It's to understand that in a world built on power, understanding power is part of being good, if by good you mean effective, impactful, and capable of shaping a better reality for yourself and others. Because when you open your eyes to the truth, that fairness is not a guarantee, but a story we've been sold to keep us quiet, then you can finally begin to write your own story. Not a story of blind sacrifice, but of conscious strength. Not of mere obedience, but of deliberate ownership. Not waiting for the world to change you, but learning how to change your place in it. So what do you do once you've seen the lie? Once you realize that waiting to be rewarded for your obedience is a dead end? You don't throw away your morals. You redefine what strength looks like. This is the mistake many make when they first wake up. They see the cynicism, the manipulation, and they think the only alternative to being exploited is becoming heartless. Or they swing to the other extreme, becoming paralyzed by the perceived unfairness of it all. But Nietzsche didn't preach cruelty. He wasn't telling you to abandon integrity. He was urging you to stop confusing submission with virtue. His philosophical project, in many ways, was aimed at overcoming nihilism and weakness. His solution wasn't to destroy morality, but to overcome the morality of weakness, the slave morality that he believed had come to dominate Western thought. It was a call to become someone who doesn't just follow rules, but writes new ones, or at least consciously chooses which rules to live by. Someone who doesn't need external permission to live with purpose and define their own values. In Nietzsche's words, that person is the Übermensch, the overman, or perhaps better translated as the overcomer. This isn't a call to become a tyrant or a villain. The Übermensch is envisioned as a fully realized individual, a creator of values, someone who walks away from systems that no longer serve them and builds something better in their place, even if that something better is simply their own life, lived authentically and powerfully. The Übermensch doesn't sit quietly hoping to be seen. He defines his own meaning. This figure doesn't wait to be promoted. He creates impact on his terms. They understand the system but isn't enslaved by it. They know when to play the game and when to change the board. They understand that power isn't evil. It's necessary. Not power over others as a primary goal, but power over yourself, your direction, your destiny. The power to affirm life and create value on your own terms. You've seen these people in real life, perhaps in glimpses or in grand examples. The entrepreneur who walked away from a stable job to build something bold, driven by a vision others couldn't see. The investor who turned rejection into innovation, learning from failure instead of being defeated by it. The artist who perseveres despite indifference. The builder who stopped asking for permission and started taking risks, shouldering the responsibility that comes with it. The original text mentioned Elon Musk, fired from a company he helped create, dismissed by others as reckless until he built an empire on vision, conviction, and the refusal to be ruled by fear. Regardless of one's opinion of such figures, they embody a certain detachment from conventional approval and a drive to impose their will and vision upon the world. What separates these people isn't just talent or luck, though those can play a role. It's mindset. They didn't wait for the system to validate them. They stopped asking, "When will they see my worth?" and started asking, "Why am I giving them that power over my self-assessment in the first place?" That shift from waiting to creating, from submitting to owning, that's the path Nietzsche pointed to. That's what it means to step out of the cage of moral labor. But here's the hard truth. Escaping that cage means letting go of something deeply comfortable, your attachment to being seen as good by everyone, according to conventional, often passively accepted, standards. It means being willing to disappoint people who benefit from your silence and your compliance. It means being willing to stand alone for a time while you build a new foundation based on your own consciously chosen values. That takes more than confidence. It takes courage. The courage to be misunderstood, the courage to define success on your own terms. Because true strength isn't about domination. It's about authorship. It's about writing a life that aligns with your deepest values. Not the values handed to you by a system designed to keep you docile, but values you have forged in the fire of your own experience and reflection. This isn't about becoming selfish. It's about becoming sovereign over your own life. So ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped waiting to be rewarded and started rewarding yourself with the life you actually want? What would it look like to take concrete steps towards that, however small? What would it look like to stop asking for a seat at the table and start building your own? You don't have to become ruthless, but you do have to become responsible for cultivating and exercising your own power. Because once you realize the system won't save you, the only path forward is to stop being a servant of it and start becoming the author of something greater, even if that greater is simply a life lived with more freedom, purpose, and integrity on your own terms. So what does action look like after the awakening? After you've seen through the illusion of moral labor, after you've stopped waiting for fairness, after you've chosen not to abandon morality, but to reclaim your power. What's next? It starts with understanding this. Kindness is not weakness, but strategic kindness, that's strength. Too often, people confuse being good with being passive. They think saying yes, avoiding conflict, and putting others first in every single instance makes them virtuous. But Nietzsche, and indeed many strategic thinkers, would suggest that morality without consciousness is just obedience in disguise. The goal isn't to become cold or manipulative. It's to become conscious, to learn how to move through the world with both a moral compass and a survival strategy. Strategic kindness means knowing when to help and when to walk away. It means discerning who genuinely needs and appreciates your help, and who is merely exploiting your generosity. It means reading people, not just trusting them blindly. It means understanding context, when to speak, when to stay silent, when to strike, metaphorically speaking, in terms of asserting your needs or pursuing an opportunity. It means you don't say yes to everyone just to be liked. You say yes when it aligns with your goals, your truth, your strength, and your capacity. Because here's the thing. Not every job deserves your loyalty. Not every manager or organization will reciprocate it. Not every leader deserves your trust. Trust must be earned, not given away freely. Not every opportunity deserves your time. Your time and energy are your most precious, non-renewable resources. You must become the kind of person who knows when to walk away, to recognize when a situation is no longer serving you, your growth, your values, your well-being, and has the strength to leave. Leaving is not failure. Sometimes it's the beginning of freedom. It's an act of self-respect. This is where power comes in, not as something you take from others, but something you claim for yourself. The power to create, the power to say no, the power to build systems where you're not just earning, you're owning. Where your efforts contribute to equity you hold. Where your energy doesn't just fuel someone else's machine. It fuels a mission that reflects your values. That might mean starting your own business, even a small one, to gain autonomy. Or building a secondary income stream to reduce dependency. Or consciously learning how influence works, not to deceive, but to defend your vision and advocate for your ideas. It might mean learning negotiation not as a battle, but as a way to ensure fair exchange. Setting boundaries clearly and firmly. Saying, I won't do this anymore, and meaning it. These are not acts of aggression. They are acts of self-definition. These are not betrayals of your morals. These are expressions of your maturity, of an integrated understanding that good intentions must be paired with effective action. Because the truth is, if you don't learn how to play the power game, you will always be a pawn in it. You'll be subject to the moves of others. But if you do learn, you don't have to lose your soul in the process. This is not an endorsement of Machiavellian ruthlessness. The key is to use power as a tool, not a trophy. To see it as a means to achieve worthy ends. Let your ethics guide your direction, but let strategy carry your decisions. What are your core principles? How can you act in the world in a way that is both effective and aligned with those principles? Nietzsche put it simply in his concept of the will to power, which is often misunderstood as a desire to dominate others. More accurately, it can be seen as an innate drive within all living things to grow, to strive, to overcome obstacles, to express their inherent strength and potential. Power is not evil. It's the will to become more. More than a servant, more than a cog, more than just the good employee. It's the will to become the author of your own worth, the architect of your own life. And you can't do that if you treat morality as a cage of externally imposed restrictions. You have to treat it as a compass, one that points to your north, not someone else's approval. So no, don't throw away your principles. Don't become another cynical player chasing status for status's sake. That's just another kind of trap. But do learn how the game is played. Do understand leverage. Do recognize when you're being used and when you're being seen, valued, and respected. Do learn to differentiate between genuine collaboration and subtle exploitation. Because the future doesn't belong to the obedient alone. It belongs to the clear, the conscious, the ones who merge principle with power, empathy with edge. It belongs to those who understand that true strength isn't loud or domineering, but quiet, confident, and rooted in self-knowledge. Not the ones who wait for the world to change, but the ones who learn to change the terms of their own existence. If you grew up believing that hard work is enough, that if you just keep your head down, stay loyal, and do things the right way, life will reward you, then it's time to wake up. It's time for an upgrade to that belief system. Not because hard work is worthless. It is absolutely essential. But because hard work without power, without strategy, without ownership, will keep you stuck in a cycle of exertion without commensurate advancement or fulfillment. The person who truly thrives, the one Nietzsche might call the real man or the Übermensch, doesn't just labor. He sees the system for what it is. He approaches it with a critical and discerning eye. He studies it, understands it, and when the rules no longer serve him, or when they are fundamentally unjust or limiting, he writes new ones for himself. He seeks to operate by his own code, a code forged from strength, wisdom, and a commitment to his own flourishing and the values he has consciously chosen. That's the difference between surviving and leading, between being a cog in someone else's machine and becoming the architect of your own future. It's a profound shift in perspective, from being a passive recipient of circumstances to an active shaper of your destiny. So, if you're tired of waiting, if you're done with the myth that sacrifice is enough, if you're ready to think deeper, act smarter, and live on your own terms, this is where it begins. It begins with questioning, with learning, and with the courageous decision to reclaim your agency. This exploration is just the beginning. The journey of understanding these dynamics and applying them is ongoing. Subscribe to discover the kind of philosophy that doesn't just explain the world, but gives you the tools to reshape your place in it. One idea at a time, one decision at a time. Thank you for joining me in this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep authoring your own life.